Welcome back to the last segment of this morning's Mid-Morning Matters with me, June Bailey. I'm here with you for another hour. I have a very full studio this morning. I've been joined by three lovely ladies from the world of architecture. I have Claire, I have Joanna and I have Sandra, and they are all here to talk to us this morning, and they're all looking slightly apprehensive and they've come in with a lovely list of music. We heard the first one there, that was Fleetwood Mac. Nice choice. And it's lovely to meet you all. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, nice to be here.
Can you all hear properly? You're all
yes.
Okay?
Lovely, thank you.
Fantastic. So if you'd like to perhaps just introduce yourselves first, and then we can explain to the listeners what each of you do and how you come together. That's probably the best place to start, isn't it? Okay. Who wants to go first?
Okay, I'm Claire Truman. I'm an architect specialising in heritage buildings and interiors, and I went self-employed in June. So it's very exciting times for me, and I've met this wonderful group of women who are involved in architecture and interiors. We share a lot of experiences together. We started meeting in Reading last February.
Wow, so still quite new.
I'm Joanna, Harvey. I'm an interior designer based over in Sonning. We have a small practice there. I've been doing interiors since I was a little girl, so it's literally in my DNA. And I'm just delighted to be with the ladies just to grow my skill set. They totally inspire me every time I'm with them, so it's very exciting to be with them here today.
Oh, it's lovely when it just bounces off onto you, isn't it?
Oh, it's wonderful.
And I'm Sandra Payne. I have a practice called Inhabitat Design Studios. We're based in Windsor, and my practice has been around for about 5 years now. So we're going on to the next stage of growth, and I've been part of the WAM, the Women Architects meetups that Claire heads in Reading since February, since it started, and that's me.
Great. Well, thank you all for coming in. It's lovely that you've all managed to make it in on the same day, because I'm sure you're all very busy. So thank you to Carla Delaney for setting all that up and then leaving me to run the show. So she's off spending time with her new granddaughter. So I am running the show for her this week, and it's lovely that you're all here. It says here, why is there a focus on female architects this year?
Well, we're fortunate enough that Henley Life magazine and other local newspapers have picked up our story. We're a newly formed group of female architects and designers. And this year in particular is the centenary of the women's vote.
Of course.
So we've been made a focus of Henley Life magazine, a February issue, and I think they're also continuing with the March issue as well. Just to talk about this women in architecture and design, and really taking stock of where we are now, really. We're still very underrepresented in the profession. We're talking specifically about architecture at the moment. But, for example, when you go to university, the intake is broadly 50-50 female-male, sometimes slightly more female. And females tend to outperform males actually at university, which is always a nice pat on the back.
Just at university or generally in life?
But it's a sad fact of life that when I qualified over 14 years ago, there was only 14% women.
Wow.
That has improved somewhat. We're now at 26% qualified architects are women. But there are still a lot of questions around that. Why is that happening? Why is it still happening in that way? Why isn't progress happening quickly enough? Why are women dropping out, perhaps? Or why are they just choosing not to qualify as an architect and choose a different alternative route? So I think at the moment, particularly with the Me Too campaign that's happened recently, there's still a lot of issues around equality in all walks of life. And certainly we've felt this for a long time in architecture.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking about that just before over the phone, just saying, well, we don't want to sound as if we are, complaining and saying that, women should be represented and so more and so on. But it is a truth, a fact that architecture is a highly pressured career, and also as an architect, you are always expected to put in that extra hour. A project is not finished until it's finished. There are deadlines, tight deadlines, and particularly if you work in the commercial world, big practices that we used to work, we find that is very incompatible with life and work balance, and it's not only for women, it's also the case for our male counterparts. They lots of young architects want to share 50-50 with their wives or partners. They bringing up of the children and being at home, or being going to school and going to see that play and so on and so forth. And it's a career that by nature is always being very, very time demanding, and women are bound to suffer more because we are the sort of the heart of the home, shall we call ourselves? But we are the ones who run the show at home.
The glue that holds it all together.
Yes, and as much as our husbands and partners do support us, and it is very demanding to keep a full-time, all singing, all dancing job in town and have a family of 3 young kids, and all the pressures from work. And it's not the only profession. Claire and I were discussing that over the phone yesterday. There are lots of other professions, doctors, nurses, that they also are in similar position. But it seems that architecture is one of those that it gets hit, and the statistics show it, that women drop out and go on to doing something else with their lives, which is after 7-8 years training, it's a shame. So that's where we're trying to discuss it openly and try to understand how we can best support one another. But we do work with male, and we like working, and it's a good balance to have in an office male and female in equal proportion.
And I guess whoever you're working with in your team, you're going to bounce ideas off each other and see things in a different way, male or female. And sometimes people just have a different way of looking at something that you may not have seen. So it's quite interesting to just get that, and you're always going to get a different dynamic, aren't you, depending on who you're working with. So one of the things that we were speaking about on the phone before you came in, when people visualise what an architect looks like, they may not first think of the person as a female. Why do you think that is?
Well, there's been this stereotype of the architect coming in with with their tie and the formality and the professional, the distant professional. That I don't know many architects like that, but there is that.
So maybe that's an outmoded vision now.
Absolutely. But it still is there, and when a young female architect in jeans turns up, it's always a little bit of a surprise. People to say, oh, you're the architect, and you're the business owner of the practice, or you're the director. This tends to become as a surprise. Once we get over the initial, and we start talking about design, and we start talking about all the things that we're supposed to be discussing in the meeting, people quickly get over that. I don't know, any other take on that?
Well, the building industry tends to be male dominated, so it's only now you're actually starting to see a lot more ladies actually working on the sites, and you have to be quite confident, I think, to hold your own with some of the people we work with, because they assume you don't know what you're talking about, whether it's the plumbing, the electrics, and for me, I've always been very hands-on, so I like to know what's going on and understand completely. So sometimes you have come.
You get that old well-worn cliche, don't you? That is your husband around? Can I ask him? I get that at the door sometimes. I'm like, you can leave.
I don't think my husband would have a clue.
The next question to bring out is, what does an architect do? Because it's obviously not just buildings, but the whole kind of wider social role. I've got three scared faces looking at me.
It's an excellent question, and it could take us all day. So we're going to try and be selective. Broadly, an architect really, sometimes I think my experience is people bring architects in to do drawings, and I think that's probably what we're best known for. But in actuality, the value of the architect is really right from the start. When the initial ideas, if you're even just contemplating doing something, the idea is really to talk through your aspirations, your lifestyle, your 10, 20-year plan, everything about what could influence the design. And so we develop right from the initial ideas, we have a conversation, and then we gradually work through to design options. Once we've figured out a brief, the architect will help you work out your brief, which is very important to keep you focused, keep you on line for your budget or whatever your priorities may be. And then we can take it through to planning, building regulations, which is the technical aspect of it, through to construction, engaging contractors, and then whilst it's on site, checking everything's going according to plan, which sadly often it doesn't, but we're there to solve the problems as we go along.
Yeah, so you're sort of overseeing the whole thing and
Absolutely.
making sure that building a tower is going to work in somebody's garden and so on. And I guess sometimes people will come up with ideas that just aren't going to work. How do you handle dealing with that, with somebody's got their heart set on something and you have to kind of go, well, that's not quite how we can't build things out of jelly, etc.
You have to be honest. You have to. It's all about relationships, and you build these really personal, close relationships with your client because it's your job to bring their aspirations to life.
Yeah.
And starting with the architecture and then handing over to the interiors, but we need to be involved from a very early start because.
So while that plan is still formulating.
Absolutely, but you have to be open, to be honest, and have your mind open to the possibilities, because as design has evolved and technology evolves, it's amazing the things we can do now. Sure. So the things that you might think you want, but then when we can show you the possibility, it's lovely if we can open you up to that.
And absolutely, if you can start thinking of the interior at the same time as the shell and the garden, the whole thing needs to come together from day one. You have to have a vision for the whole thing.
You're right, Sandra, because it's also the way we live has changed.
Absolutely.
Because now we use our outdoors as a part of our home and entertaining, and it's so much more important. And to get it to flow and have form and function, it really is important to look at the overall picture.
Even from simple things, people like to have a lot of the time we do kitchens that come into a patio that flows into the garden, and we look at even the flooring to match the pavement.
Yes, absolutely.
Simple things like that will have a knock-on effect on the budget, on the design, on the a whole sort of aspirations, and is it going to be a warm kind of kitchen? Is it going to be a kitchen that's going to have hard surfaces, modern, minimal? And we start talking a lot about abstract concepts. Rather than exactly what materials we're going to use, and then we start homing into the materials. So it's a whole process of going backwards and forwards, as Claire explained. We look at options, and we start looking at it's not going to be a perfect design until you find it. Yeah. So we start with different options and combinations of options.
And things evolve, don't they?
Absolutely.
You actually start from the start of the project through, depending on budgets, because things do sometimes run over, and you might have something that's really important to you, so it's really important. It's our job to get that right, so we can make sure the most important aspects are budgeted, and then we can find alternatives to help assist and go.
Yeah, and I guess the more you get to know your client as well and talk to them and find out a little bit more about them, you can maybe see what their personality is like and what their style is like, and then work together to bring that out in the design.
I mean, I've worked with some people where there was no building at the end of it. There was no construction. But you can go into something thinking, I definitely need an extension. I know that's what I need.
Yeah.
And then when you've had an understanding about how you run your lifestyle, what your aspirations are, and what you really need to do, it might just be a small amount of remodelling elsewhere, and that's solved your
knocking
your
a wall
problem.
down, or
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's about opening, like Joanna said, opening your mind to other possibilities. In fact, my client went away happy and put a hot tub in the garden instead. And as Sandra was saying, all the garden's all part of it. So
yes. I think people sometimes forget about the garden. And they focus so much on the house, they haven't really thought about how they could get the most out of the garden as well, or just move things around a little bit.
I think it's just become sort of, over the last few years, it's become important to sort of think about that.
I guess
just the way we've sort of evolved. And I think with austerity, we've all thought about, maybe not moving and perhaps extending. And as your families grow, it's quite difficult sometimes to envisage how you need to use this space.
Yes.
So it's lovely to have someone who can be objective, but you need to be able to be honest. And I think that's one of the most crucial key parts of your relationship with your client, that you can both feel free to be candid. Then you get the best out of each other.
And I think people also, they're used to living, they may have been in their house a long time before they've thought about having some work done. For example, I've been in my house for about 16 years, and we've always kind of thought, it might be nice to do that, or it might be nice to do this, but we've never actually done anything. And you kind of become so acclimatised to the place that you live in that you sort of stop seeing it, and you maybe not seeing the potential that it has to be bigger or better or just arranged differently. And is that something that you come across quite a lot?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I think, as Joanna said, the objectivity of having somebody else there to have a conversation with you about it really helps draw out your priorities and see it with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think particularly with heritage buildings where I'm working, older buildings, you can get very blasé about the wall being from the 1800s.
Wow.
It's always been there. We've stuck a pin in it. It's fine. It hasn't fallen down.
Stuck a pin in it.
But so for someone like me, there does need to be that external consideration to respect the fabric that you're.
Don't stick pins in it.
Yeah.
I think it's really important though to actually. Part of our job is to be sympathetic to the building and your form and function again, and it's to marry the two, and then you've got it right. But you really have to think about how you want your space to work, and that's one of the most exciting things for us, that we can actually change this space and how your family come together, how your friends come together, how you live. At the end of the day, your home is your soft place to fall, when you get through the door, and it's got to be harmonious and comfortable and
it's
work
got to
for
feel
you.
welcoming.
Absolutely.
And a sanctuary and a haven and somewhere that you can unwind and take the day off.
And that takes us to a conversation Joanna and I had a couple of weeks ago about marriage counselling.
Yes.
When we work with families, sometimes we find ourselves in the middle, the husband says one thing, the wife says another thing, and then they ask
and you're in the middle.
What do you think?
Oh, no.
Oh, no. So a lot of the time we find that, people haven't actually discussed their views or have opposite views of certain aspects.
Yeah.
And we are the,
because they got
go-between.
very different tastes. So, and it's your job again to bring it together.
And a lot of the
make
time
it.
they don't even know it until it gets to the point when they have to choose the tiles.
Yeah. It's interesting actually. My husband, he's one of these people, he doesn't really do DIY. And he'll, you have to nag him every 6 months to do something. Or we had a downstairs cloakroom which he remodelled himself, and it took 2 years. We had no toilet for a year. We had to just use the upstairs one. It's it's not ideal. Bless him. It's lovely now. He's done a really good job. But when he had a job a few years ago where he went out to America for several weeks at a time, and one of the times he went for 5 weeks, and I just thought, I can do quite a lot in 5 weeks. I don't want him coming back and thinking, nothing's changed. I'm going to give him something interesting to come back to. So I enlisted the help of my in-laws, and between us, we took the banister down, opened out the staircase, repainted all of the downstairs hall area and the upstairs landing and all the bedrooms. And my poor son had been living with terracotta coloured walls all his life. It wasn't fair. We needed to sort that out and get some nice posters up and stuff. And he came home and he was looking, around, and he was like, this isn't my house. But why have you painted that wall white? I wanted it to be magnolia. I was like, I've done all this work and all you can do is complain about the colour of the wall. So, of course, the next time he went away, I had to paint it again. But at least I'd done it.
Yeah, so
and it does look much nicer.
Yeah, it wasn't subject conversation. Something that you.
I
you
thought
have
you
at the
weren't
dinner
here.
table
I just did it. What's the point in waiting for you to do it when I can just do it myself?
I would do the same. My husband would come back and I would have wallpapered something just because I wanted to experiment with something or just move things around. So, but I always have lots of fun doing it. So.
Well, I think you get frustrated, don't you? And you're just thinking, well, I'm just waiting for someone else to do it. Why don't I just do it myself?
Exactly. Life's a bit too short sometimes, isn't it?
Turns out I'm quite good at plastering. Going back to the role of the architect, what are the other aspects involved other than dealing directly with the client? What are the kind of other sides to that?
Yes, well, we are often being asked to work with buildings that have got a frontage and have got a facade. The front is a road, and they're not always domestic projects. They could be a school project or a shop or a community centre. So often we look at the broader picture and the setting of the building within the particular town, or if it's in the countryside, in a green belt, in a particular area. So our role is not only dealing with the client that commissions us to do the work, it's also looking at the planning aspects, not only just to get the project through planning, which we all want and aspire to, so we can build it, but also to make a positive contribution to the environment. And our designs should take that into account, and most architects, designers will look at that aspect. We have a duty of care to the wider audience, not just our client. So that's something that some architects take closer to their hearts. Some architects see that as something, okay, we do that as well, but they focus on other aspects. I particularly like to focus on that, on community, on what the community think about it, and work with my clients so their building is not considered an eyesore or in any way people are against it. So I try always, that our projects run smoothly through planning, working with the planners, working with the neighbours. If they write complaining about certain aspects, we would like to discuss with them what the issues are and try to address them rather than hide them and try and get away with something that some people may not be happy with. So that is another thing that we find ourselves when we're talking about marriage counselling. Now we're talking about a little bit being again in the middle, the eternal negotiators that we seem to be. Talking to different groups and trying to find sort of common ground for our designs. I don't know what other...
Well, I think that's really important because part of your role again is holding everybody's hand and keeping everybody in the loop, especially if you're project managing the whole thing. At the end of the day, it is your job to know what is going on with each individual contractor and supplier, and making sure that you can support and assist everybody to make it as smooth as possible. And I feel very strongly that it's really important to make sure you know who you're working with, that they are accountable, and they really care about what they're doing, because the second someone shows that they don't care about our project, I have to say goodbye.
They've got to be on board.
Absolutely.
I read something the other day and it said, we don't do half-assed, it's use your whole arse. I thought that was quite funny. But it's true, isn't it? If you go into something and your heart's not in it, you're not going to get that well-rounded result that you want. And if you can see that in somebody and you can see that they're not fully engaged with it, then they're not going to be benefiting it to the best of their ability, are they?
No, and it's about best practice, which I was sort of mentioning in the break. I think it's really important because it's very easy for someone to come in and just say, oh, I know what I'm doing. But unless you actually really do know they know what they're doing and they're accredited, you can end up with an absolute disaster on your hands, which will cost you a lot of time, stress, money, which is why it's important to make sure that we are accredited, which we are with the Royal Institute of British Architects, and in my case the Society of British and International Designers. So I think it's best practice always.
Well, it's good to work with other people that are on the same level, because then you know that they're all conscientious.
Absolutely.
And that you're going to get a cohesive mesh of people working together, because you don't want somebody that's working on something really important and they're not doing it properly, and it basically the whole underpinning of everything it all just falls apart because of this one thing. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, isn't it? You've got to get all the pieces in the right place, and they've all got to be from the right puzzle.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I was on a site a few weeks ago, and I had a certain contractor who just said to me, it's just a light. Well, it might just be another light to you, but it's not to this job.
No.
And I had to make him move sort of all the spotlights to make sure they were in line with what we needed. So I knew I wasn't his best friend, but I'm actually not paid to be your best friend. I'm paid to make sure we do a good job and make sure that it gets finished properly. So
good for you. Stick to your guns. You've got to be 100%, because otherwise, there is no. You can't get that respect from people, and you want to know that you've done a good job as well, don't you?
It's really important, to make sure you have, because you have to go to bed at night and live with yourself and
exactly.
Sort of know that you've been conscientious and done everything you can. And with all the new regulations as well coming in, you also have to make sure that you're on top of everything with the building regulations and making sure that everyone is absolutely doing their job, and health and safety. People laugh when you say health and safety, but there is a reason for it.
Yes.
So,
Particularly in the building industry.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Another thing that we were talking about women in architecture, but there's an aspect of the female and negotiating skills that I often highlight to people, because the building industry is confrontational. There's no going. Once there is a lot of money involved in a particular project, there is
get quite stressful.
It is stressful, and once something goes wrong, and inevitably things go wrong at some point, there will be blaming, and it's something that we as architects a lot of the time find either being blamed or being the ones that are trying to sort out the blaming and I know it sounds a bit negative, but it is. A lot of people are afraid of taking on a building project because
they don't want the confrontation,
or because things can go wrong, and if they go wrong, they're very costly.
Yes, it's scary, and especially in today's financial environment.
Absolutely.
When people really are holding on to every little penny they've got, because property prices are so ridiculous. It's just
it's a big risk.
It's even
for
more
a family,
risky,
for a community building. They are investing a lot of their money and effort. So what I find is that spotting, always looking ahead of what the problem could be, and always discussing it before it materialises, is the best way to keep on top of that.
Yeah, that's the best way to capture things before they get expensive, because if you're monitoring things through on site, I think probably more in the domestic side, people feel they don't need the architect overseeing things perhaps because they're there every day and all that sort of thing. But we could end up with lights in the wrong place, we could end up with plumbing in the wrong place, and that could affect where the toilet goes, for example. It could be a major consequence.
I know that one after our little downstairs cloak room.
It also has an onset with other contractors. So if you have to stop, you effectively could be taking a contractor off site, holding up the work, and that's, again, it's more money. And if you make sure that everything is done properly at every single level, there shouldn't be any problems, but it's when you're not keeping an eye on it. I personally don't believe in snag lists. I believe in getting there before. I don't want to see a snag list, because if you've got to taking care of your job and doing it properly, we shouldn't have it.
And there is an aspect, actually, particularly in my career, is setting an expectation of the contractor.
Yes.
So sort of setting early doors what your expectations are. If your expectation is not to have a snagging list, from day one, they're trying to work as hard as they can so they don't have to redo the work.
Yeah, of course.
And that's where it's important, again, to know your contractors, because they know exactly what you expect, and they want to look after you and look after your client. And that's, again, all being on the same page and really caring about the project, because it's important from your client's point of view that you're looking after their budget and managing their expectations, which, at the end of the day, if you've employed people to come on site, it is your responsibility to make sure they are doing their jobs properly.
So in a typical day for you, would you be just coming in and just liaising with everybody and making sure that they're on track? with what they're supposed to be doing?
I think I always end my day looking to see what's the schedule for the next day, and start the day also, because a lot can change during an evening.
Sure.
So for me, if it's a site visit, it's my job to take the pressure off the client and liaise with everybody and make sure everything's there, and make sure that they've got what they need, which is, it can just be down to the screws or something, like the grout. It's
holds everything up.
It's your job to make sure it's all there. But even something like, tiling, you've got to make sure you understand the screed that's been used, all the compositions that are involved, because otherwise you can end up with a disaster. So you've really got to know what you're doing and make sure your contractors do.
Yeah, well said. Should we? Well, we've got about 11 minutes. I'm trying to work out whether we just keep talking and play a song at the end. Or whether we try and squeeze another one in. I don't know how much more you've got to cover, but I've got the feeling that we could all talk about it all day. So, shall we just keep going and then just end the song?
Great.
End the song, end the show with the song. Let's do that. It means that there's going to be a fight on our hands to which one we
I was
play.
just looking down the list, actually.
We've not played many, have we? We've not played many. I knew this would happen.
That's a good sign, though, surely.
It's a very good sign, but it's also, when you've got 3 guests in, you obviously have to allow everybody a chance to speak. So it's different if it's just 2 of you. But there's a lot of information to get out as well, isn't there? So it must be, this isn't a question that you've put to me, but it's something that's popped into my head. It must be amazing when you get to the end of a project and you're looking at it together and thinking, wow, that all is perfect and it's all exactly as we wanted it, and it's the vision that the client had and it's realised in front of them. That must be pretty magical.
It's very special.
It is. And
satisfying.
I come from a long commercial background, and the largest finished project recently is the Gainsborough Hotel in Bath. And it's just fabulous when you get the photographer around there and they just take these wonderful shots, and you're just like, goodness, I don't remember it looking quite like that now that it's been cleaned. And it is fabulous just to see it all
the
come
dust
together.
off.
Because often you end up, you spend so much time with the plaster off the walls, and you spend so much time doing all the background, getting, like I said before, the plumbing in the right place, and all
You're
the
in the thick
background
of it
stuff.
and you can't see.
You don't see it, and you don't sometimes you don't actually see the finished product until they've taken the dust sheets away, and you can just stand back, and you have to get to site right at the right time. On a commercial project, I'm more conscious of that before it's handed over, then you can't get back on site, and the site for a couple of years feels your friend. It feels a place you can go to, and you know every nook and cranny, and then all of a sudden it's in the public domain, and
it's not yours anymore.
No, your baby's grown up.
Exactly, but you can't help but get personal about these things.
No.
I've got 9 houses within just over a mile of each other. I'm about to start number 10 this afternoon, and every time I go past them, I always think each time I'm going past, and because I know them, they're in my community, I need to make sure it's right. I need to make sure people are happy and making sure no one's got the same thing, which is...
Are you ever tempted to just kind of pop in?
So sometimes, yes, it could be. What's more upsetting is if they haven't left it exactly as I left it, and then I want to go...
boyfriend, isn't it? once you moved away from that project, you just look at it.
You have to let it go, don't you?
It's a bit like it's a bit like going back to your old house to pick up the post, and they go, "Come in and have a look," and you're like, "No." I did that once. It wasn't pleasant.
It's not.
I saw some photos on Twitter from the Gainsborough Hotel, and they'd put their Christmas tree not quite where I thought they were going to put it.
No. Did you email them? Excuse me. That shouldn't be there.
I think I might have wanted to, because I wouldn't have settled until it was exactly where it should have been.
Oh, that's so funny. Oh, dear me. I'm just trying to work out what we haven't covered. Are there any elements that you really want the listeners to be aware of that we haven't touched on?
I think it was the last thing we wanted to leave people with was one of my current clients, when I went to see him for the first time. He was interviewing 3 or 4 architects for his project, and he asked me, how do I choose? That you're all
how do you pick the right one?
How do you choose the right architect,
project?
the one that works, will work for us? And I never got that question asked directly that way, but I know it's something that people will have to make a decision about. And a lot of the time we go there and we listen a lot. I tend to listen a lot, and then I may just come up with some comments, but not with many design comments, because I need to digest the information. I can't just come up with a magic.
Got to reflect on it.
Yeah, as a magic solution, unless it's obvious. Sometimes it is obvious. I have to say it, but it is not very often the case. So my advice to him was, well, who do you feel you can work with? Look at the person. Obviously, you can go and see some of their previous projects. You can speak to some of their previous clients.
Absolutely.
And ask questions. And I always offer to put them in touch with 2 or 3 people and have a talk on the phone, or go and even visit some of my previous projects. But I always say to them, reflect on the relationship, because you will have a relationship with your architects that, talking about boyfriends again, it always starts like a romance, and it's always pleasant, and you talk about dreams, aspirations, and then when we start looking at budget, we start looking at planning constraints, we start looking at the process, reality hits, and that love affair will turn into a marriage, and you want to make it work. So it's I always say, that is important to me as well, that I can work with that family, with that particular group of people.
You've got the reach and understanding, haven't you?
Yes, and that we are on the same wavelength,
working on the same side and working as a team.
And that I feel, that I can be open and honest with them, and the same. We all feel, that way when we start a relationship of any kind, but particularly with your architect, it's going to be a long-term relationship for if we're going to be there for you up to the end of your project.
You've got to get it right.
And you have to get it right. So take your time to make that important decision.
So that's good advice to the listeners, isn't it, actually? If you're thinking of taking the step towards having someone come and work with you on a project, make sure you take your time picking the right people.
And budget. I think being clear about your budget, so that we can manage your aspirations and your expectations. Because I think that's sometimes the elephant in the room. So for me, it's more important to get it out in the open from the start. And if you don't know what your budget is, and we can help you, sort of guide you on how much things are going to be. But I think just being able to be candid and comfortable, because you are together a long time. That was a very good analogy about sort of almost ending got married, because you're literally in people's space. You're getting into people's heads and bringing out, sort of what they need, and it can be very stressful for everyone involved. So sometimes you just need to be a calming influence.
Yeah,
I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it sounds like you all know exactly what you want to bring to it, and you know what you need to get out of it, and you know how people have to work together to. I don't want to say to see the big picture, but you know what I mean, don't you?
But we are generalists. We obviously we all specialise in different. Joanna with the interiors, Claire with the sort of listed buildings and conservation, and my practice we specialise on eco and green design. But we also have to have a broader knowledge, and we have to be able to specify the screws that will fix these particular timber, and also we have to be able to deal with bats that may appear, and when we do this bat survey to get your planning through, and we say, why bats? Well, you're on Greenbelt, and so
we have bats in our garden.
You have bats in your gardens, and they roost everywhere, and if you are doing an extension to a house,
you have to take that into account.
You have to take that into account, because they're protected species, or the red-breasted newt.
And they're not as good at catching moths as I'd like them to be.
They're beautiful.
They are lovely.
And also, I'd like to say, sort of think about this, because you're going to be living in this space for a very long time.
You've got to really love it.
You've really got to love it. I consider it wrong if I get called back within a couple of years, because that's maybe just to change some cushions for you, but I've got it wrong if I'm back to do the whole house. So just think about it, how you're going to spend your money, and making sure you do it properly the first time. I know sometimes you could think, gosh, I don't want to spend that, and some people will talk you into cutting maybe a corner, but it really is not worth it.
Not for the long term, because it's going to be hopefully your forever home, and you want it to be exactly as you want to wake up and go, this This is
Absolutely.
wonderful. Not, that wall's in the wrong place. I knew I shouldn't have let them put that elephant in the room. There's an actual elephant. Have you ever actually had to put an elephant in anywhere?
No. Well, I did some fossils once. That was one of my strangest things I was asked to arrange. So there might have been a fossil in there. That was
That's an elephant.
A bit of an elephant. Oh. Well, it's been really lovely having you all in this morning. Thank you so much. I'm sorry we didn't get to play anywhere near enough of your musical choices. I think I managed to get at least one each. But I'll keep the list, and next time I do a show, I'll play some of the others. But it's been really lovely to meet you all, and I feel enlightened and slightly less scared about the prospect of possibly thinking of involving an architect in something later, in when I've actually got some money.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
It's been really
wonderful.
lovely, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and you've looked more comfortable as the hour has gone on.
I'm sure.
There was a little bit of jangly nerves going on at the beginning, but you all seem very relaxed now. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much.